Shadows shouldn't move when you're standing still. They shouldn't grow darker when you turn on more lights. They shouldn't have weight or presence or the ability to make the temperature drop 15 degrees in a single breath. And they definitely, absolutely, should not watch you with an attention so focused you can feel it crawling across your skin like invisible insects. But the shadow in my hallway does all of these things and more. My name is Sam Chen, and I'm a night shift nurse at County General Hospital. I'm 32 years old, perpetually tired, and until 3 weeks ago, I considered myself fairly unshakable. When you work from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. in a busy urban hospital, you see things that would make most people faint. Blood, death, the moment when life leaves a body and something fundamental changes in the room. I've held the hands of dying patients, performed CPR on gunshot victims, and cleaned up messes that would turn your stomach. I thought I understood darkness. Thought I understood fear. Thought I'd seen everything the universe had to offer in terms of things that go bump in the night. I was catastrophically, terrifyingly wrong. The shadow in my hallway taught me that there are worse things than death. Worse things than blood and violence and the casual cruelties I witness every shift. There are things that exist in the spaces between light and dark, between living and dying, between the world we see and the world we sense, but cannot prove. And one of those things lives, Sif. You can call it living in the hallway of apartment 7B. I moved into the Riverside Apartments on a Tuesday in late September, when the leaves were just starting to turn and the air had that crisp quality that makes you think of apple cider and Switz's Halloween decorations. The building was a 7-story brick structure from the 1960s, the kind of place that had probably been nice when it was new, but had slowly declined into affordable housing for people who don't ask too many questions. The rent was cheap spaciously. Cheap for the neighborhood, but I'd learned not to look gift horses in the mouth. I'd been living with my sister and her husband for 6 months while saving money. And while I loved them both, sharing a 1-bedroom apartment with a couple was its own special circle of hell. Apartment 7B was small, but it was mine. My own space. My own walls. My own rules. The landlord, Mr. Chuno, relation, despite the shared surname, was a thin, nervous man in his 60s who handed me the keys with a expression I couldn't quite read. Anxiety, guilt, sadness. The previous tenant left suddenly, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Broke her lease. Forfeited her deposit. Said she couldn't. That the apartment didn't suit her needs. What was wrong with it? I asked, looking around the empty living room. Standard apartment beige walls, scuffed hardwood floors, windows that faced a brick wall across a narrow alley. Nothing spectacular, but nothing obviously wrong either. She didn't say. Just packed up one day and left. Mr. Chen shifted his weight from foot to foot. You'll take good care of the place, won't you? It's a special building. Historic. Been in my family for 3 generations. I'm a nurse. I work nights. I'll barely be here except to sleep. He nodded, looking almost relieved. Good, good. Well, here are your keys. Trash goes out Thursday. Laundry in the basement. If you need anything, I'm in 1A. He left quickly, practically fleeing down the stairs. I should have taken that as a sign. Should have wondered why he seemed so eager to leave. Why he'd rented to me after a 10-minute conversation and a cursory credit check. Why the apartment had been vacant for 3 months despite the low rent. But I was tired. Exhausted from moving boxes, from the heat of the late summer day, from working a double shift the night before. I just wanted to unpack my bed, set up my coffee maker, and sleep for 12 hours. The hallway that would change my life forever was 15 feet long and utterly unremarkable. It connected the living room to the 2 bedrooms and the bathroom's standard railroad apartment layout. Beige walls. Cheap brown carpet worn thin in the middle from decades of foot traffic. 3 doors, bathroom on the left, bedroom straight ahead, second bedroom on the right. A single overhead light. Fixture with a frosted glass cover that had probably been installed in 1975 and never updated. Nothing special. Nothing unusual. Just a hallway. except for the shadow I first saw it that evening, around 8 p.m. I'd been unpacking boxes for hours and needed to use the bathroom. I walked into the hallway from the living room and stopped dead. At the far end of the hall, right where the light from the living room met the darkness of the unlit hallway, stood a shadow, human-shaped, roughly 6 feet tall, perfectly still. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked again. The shadow remained. Now, I'm a scientist by training. Nursing school drills rational, thinking into you like a sergeant drilling recruits. Observe, hypothesize, test. There's always an explanation, always a logical reason, so I looked for one. The shadow was probably just caused by the way the light hit the corner. Some trick of perspective? I was tired-eyed, been awake for almost 30 hours straight. Sleep deprivation causes hallucinations. Everyone knows that. I walked toward the bathroom, keeping my eyes on the shadow. It didn't move, didn't shift, just stood there. A dark, human-shaped silhouette against the slightly lighter beige wall. I flipped on the hallway light, a harsh fluorescent that flickered twice before illuminating the space with cold. Institutional brightness, the shadow got darker, not lighter. As shadows should when you add light, darker, deeper, blacker, like it was absorbing the light instead of being dispersed by it. I stood there, hand still on the light switch, staring at this impossibility. My heart rate picked up. My palms started sweating. That primitive part of the brain that evolved to recognize predators in the darkness was screaming at me to run. But I'm stubborn. It's gotten me through nursing school, through brutal shifts, through codes where patients died despite our best efforts. Stubborn has kept me going when quitting would have been easier, so instead of running, I walked closer to the shadow. 5 feet away, I could feel the cold radiating from it. Not like air conditioning, more like opening a freezer. Dry, biting cold that made my breath mist in the air. 4 feet away, I noticed it had no features. No face, no clothing details, no texture. Just solid darkness shaped vaguely like a person. 3 feet away, the temperature dropped so sharply I gasped. My skin prickled with goosebumps. The hair on my arm stood straight up. 2 feet away, I stopped, because I could feel it watching me, not with eyes. It had no eyes, no face, nothing that could physically see. But I felt its attention the way you feel someone staring at the back of your head in a crowded room, focused, intense, aware. I raised my hand, reaching toward the shadow, fingers trembling slightly. Part of me screamed that this was insane, that I should back away, call someone, do anything except touch this thing, but I had to know. Had to understand. My fingers passed through empty air where the shadow appeared to be. No resistance. No texture. Nothing physical. But the temperature of my hand dropped so fast it hurt, like plunging it into ice water. I yanked it back and stared at my fingers. They were bright red, almost purple, covered in goosebumps. When I touched them with my other hand, they felt like ice. I backed away slowly, not turning my back on the shadow until I was in the living room. Then I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, and took a picture of the hallway. The photo showed a perfectly normal hallway. Beige walls, brown carpet, overhead light. No shadow. I looked up from my phone. The shadow was still there, still watching. I didn't use the hallway the rest of that night. I held my bladder until morning, used the kitchen sink to brush my teeth, and slept on the couch with all the lights on. When I woke at noon, I'd set my alarm for my night shift. The shadow was still there, and it had moved 3 feet closer to my bedroom door. I'm not a person who panics easily. You can't be in my profession. When someone codes, when there's a mass casualty event, when a patient crashes unexpectedly, you don't have time for panic. You assess, you act. You deal with emotions later, so I treated the shadow like I treat any medical mystery, systematically, scientifically, with careful observation and documentation. Over the next week, I established a routine. Every time I came home from my shift, exhausted, feet aching, mind numb from 12 hours of caring for the sick and dying, I'd check the hallway before even taking off my shoes. The shadow was always there, and it was always slightly closer to my bedroom door than it had been before. I started keeping a journal, bought a small notebook and a measuring tape. Each day I'd measure the exact distance from the bedroom door to the nearest edge of the shadow. Record the time. Note any changes in appearance, size, or behavior. Day 1, shadow is 12 feet from bedroom door. Approximately 6 feet tall, 2 feet wide. Humanoid shape. No movement observed while watching. Temperature around shadow, 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Room temperature, 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Day 2, shadow is 11 feet from bedroom door. Same size, same shape. Temperature around shadow, 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Room temperature, 73 degrees Fahrenheit. Day 3, shadow is 10 feet 3 inches from bedroom door. Shadow appears slightly darker today, especially around the edges. Temperature around shadow, 53 degrees Fahrenheit. Room temperature, 72 degrees Fahrenheit. The pattern was clear. The shadow was moving. About 1 foot per day, always closer to my bedroom. At this rate, it would reach my door in less than 2 weeks. I tried everything I could think of to document the phenomenon scientifically. I set up my phone to record video of the hallway for hours at a time. The videos showed nothing, just an empty, well-lit hallway. But when I watched them in real time, looking at the hallway directly, shadow was visible. I borrowed a thermal imaging camera from a friend in radiology. The camera showed a massive cold spot exactly where the shadow stood, sometimes as low as 45 degrees Fahrenheit, a full 30 degrees colder than the surrounding air. But the cold spot had no shape on the thermal image, just a blob of cold. The human-shaped silhouette was only visible to the naked eye. I tried different types of lighting. LED bulbs, incandescent, even brought home an old halogen lamp from the hospital storage. Every single light source made the shadow darker instead of brighter. The more light I added to the hallway, the more solid and opaque the shadow became. I researched online, found hundreds of stories about shadow people, shadow figures, dark entities that appeared in homes. Most were either obvious hoaxes or written by people who sounded frankly unhinged. But a few sounded like what I was experiencing. One forum post stuck with me. A woman in Oregon describing an entity in her hallway that moved closer every day. She'd documented it for 2 weeks before suddenly stopping posting. The last post was just, "It reached my door. I don't think I'll be posting anymore." She'll never post it again. I checked her profile obsessively. 5 years of silence. There's a shadow that only appears in my hallway recap. Sam Chen discovered a shadow in apartment 7B's hallway that moves closer each day. After walking through it, Sam experienced the death of David Chen, a construction worker who fell in 1965. Sam helped David's daughter Michelle find closure, releasing his spirit, but the shadow returned. Revealing the building has many trapped spirits, serving as unwilling guardians of a barrier between worlds. 3. Days after David Chen's spirit crossed over and Michelle Rodriguez left my apartment with tears of grateful closure streaming down her weathered face. I came home from my night shift to find not one shadow, but 3. They stood in my hallway like sentries, like guards, like warnings. The first was small child-sized, maybe 4 feet tall. It stood closest to the living room, where David's shadow had first appeared. The second was the shape of an animal, low to the ground, possibly a dog. And the third was human-shaped but hunched. As if carrying a great weight, I stood in my doorway, my scrubs still smelling of antiseptic and exhaustion, my body screaming for sleep after a particularly brutal shift where I'd lost 2 patients despite our best efforts. And I stared at these 3 new shadows, feeling something shift inside me. Not fear. Not anymore. Something else. Recognition, maybe. Or responsibility. Mrs. Park from apartment 7A knocked on my open door. I'd given her a key after the incident with David. We'd formed an unlikely friendship to people who could see what others couldn't, bound by our shared burden. "You see them too?" she asked, though it wasn't really a question. 3 now. Different sizes. different shapes. Mine came back as well. 2 in my hallway. Mrs. Park stepped into my apartment, closing the door softly behind her. She was a small woman in her 70s, with steel gray hair always pulled into a neat bun and eyes that had seen too much. I researched after David crossed over. Called the Historical Society. Talked to former residents. Sam, this building has a history we didn't know about. She pulled out a folder stuffed with photocopies and printouts. We sat at my kitchen table, the only place in the apartment where I couldn't see the hallway shadows, and she showed me what she'd found. The Riverside Apartments. Built in 1962, sat on land that had previously held the Riverside Asylum for the Mentally Ill. The asylum had operated from 1887 to 1899. When a fire later ruled arson, though no culprit was ever found, killed 93 patients and 7 staff members. Most had been locked in their rooms, a standard practice at the time to prevent wandering. They died screaming, clawing at doors, inhaling smoke, and burning alive. The asylum had been demolished immediately after the fire. The land sold cheap to developers who wanted to forget the tragedy. For 63 years, the land sat empty. Local legends said it was cursed. Children dared each other to walk across it at night. Several people reported seeing figures in the empty lot shadows that moved independently. Faces that appeared in the darkness. Then in 1962, my landlord's grandfather, Chen Wei, bought the land for almost nothing and built the Riverside Apartments. A 7-story building. 14 apartments per floor. 98 units total, 90-3 asylum deaths. 98 apartments. Do you see it? Mrs. Park asked. The numbers almost match. And every apartment ending in Betha B wing has reported shadows. Unexplained phenomena. Tenants who leave suddenly, or she paused. Tenants who die under mysterious circumstances. I thought about Mr. Wilson, the previous tenant Mrs. Park had mentioned. Found dead in his hallway, face frozen in terror. Heart attack, the coroner said. But his expression suggested he'd seen something no heart attack could explain. Why B wing specifically? I asked. Because that's where the asylum's locked ward was. Where the most violent patients were kept. Where the most deaths occurred during the fire. Mrs. Park spread out a map, showing the asylum's layout overlaid on the current apartment building's floor plan. The B-wing apartments lined up almost exactly with the old locked ward, so these spirits, the shadows, they're the asylum patients. Some of them, perhaps. But I think it's more complicated than that. Mrs. Park pulled out another document. This one, a construction report from 1962. 5 workers died building this complex. 1 fell down an elevator shaft that was David Chen. 1 was crushed by equipment. 1 had a heart attack on site. 1 fell from scaffolding. And 1 simply vanished, never found. All in the B-wing? All in the B-wing. I looked toward my hallway, where 3 shadows stood waiting. So what are they? Why are they here? What do they want? I don't know. But I think we need to find out before more appear. Over the next 2 weeks, I walked through each shadow in my hallway. Experiencing their deaths like I had with David, the child's shadow was Tommy Brennan, age 7, an asylum patient who'd been locked in isolation for behavioral problems, which I discovered through his fragmented memories meant he'd cried too much after his mother abandoned him there. He died alone in his locked room, calling for his mama while smoke filled his lungs. He'd been dead for 125 years, trapped as a shadow, unable to move on. I found his descendants a great-great-great-niece who lived 3 states away. I called her, explained what I'd discovered, asked if she'd be willing to come. She thought I was insane at first, but something in my voice must have convinced her. She drove 18 hours to stand in my hallway and tell 7-year-old Tommy, who'd been waiting for over a century, that his family remembered him. That he wasn't forgotten. That he could stop waiting and rest now. His shadow dissolved into golden light. And I wept for a child who'd suffered so long. The dog shadow was Max, a German shepherd who'd been a guard dog at the asylum. He'd died trying to save patients during the fire, barking warnings, leading people toward exits before smoke overcame him. Loyal to the end. Waiting for someone to tell him he was a good boy? I did. Sat in my hallway, spoke to the dog-shaped shadow, and said, "You were a good boy, Max. The best boy. You saved people. You can rest now." His shadow dissolved into light, and I felt something break inside my chest. The goodness in that dog, waiting over a century for simple acknowledgement. The hunched shadow was harder. Her name was Margaret, a nurse who'd worked at the asylum. She'd stayed during the fire, trying to unlock doors, trying to save patients, until the ceiling collapsed on her. She'd carried the weight of 93 deaths on her shoulders for over a century. Convinced she should have saved more, I brought another nurse to meet her, an elderly woman from County General who'd worked there for 50 years. She stood in my hallway and spoke to Margaret's shadow. "You did everything you could. You stayed when you could have run. You died trying to save them. That's more than most would do. You can let go now. Let go of the guilt. Rest." Margaret's shadow dissolved into light, and I understood something profound. These weren't just ghosts. They were souls in purgatory, punishing themselves with eternal waiting. But as each shadow crossed over, as each spirit found peace, I felt something else. A thinning, a weakening. Like the fabric of reality in my hallway was becoming stretched, worn, transparent. And on the 14th day, after I'd helped 7 spirits cross over, something new appeared. Not a shadow, something else. Something darker. The entity that appeared in Mrs. Park's hallway was massive, 7 feet tall, broad-shouldered, radiating cold so intense that frost formed on the walls and our breath crystallized in the air. It wasn't a shadow. It was the absence of light itself, a void shaped like a man. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere, like the building itself was talking. "Stop." Mrs. Park and I stood frozen. I'd walked through 7 shadows, experienced 7 deaths, felt 7 souls cross over. I thought I understood what I was dealing with. I was wrong. "You're destroying the barrier," the entity said. Its voice wasn't angry. It was tired, ancient, sad. "Each spirit you release weakens the seal. Each guardian you remove opens a gap. You don't understand what you're doing, guardian." I found my voice. They were suffering, trapped, waiting for over a century. Yes, because they serve a purpose. This building sits on a thin place, a wound between worlds. The fire that killed 93 people, tore the veil, created a permanent weak point. The spirits of the dead anchor it, keep it closed, prevent other things from coming through. Entity moved closer, and the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. Ice crystals formed on the window. David Chen, Tommy Brennan, Max, Margaret, they weren't just trapped here. They were holding the barrier closed. Every spirit that crosses over leaves a hole, and when enough holes appear, the seal fails entirely. "What comes through?" Mrs. Park asked, her voice small and frightened. "The same thing that burned the asylum in the first place. The entity that feeds on suffering, on death, on fear. It's been waiting on the other side for 125 years. Growing stronger, growing hungrier. The fire was just its first attempt to break through. The spirits of those who died have been keeping it contained ever since." I thought about the 7 spirits I'd released. The joy on Michelle Rodriguez's face. Tommy's relief at finally being told he could rest. Max getting to be a good boy one last time. Margaret's guilt finally lifting. "So what?" I said, my voice harder than I felt. "We just leave them there? Suffering? Serving as eternal guards against some cosmic horror. That's the solution. That's survival. Their suffering serves the greater good. Protects thousands of people who live in this building and the surrounding area. Is 7 souls' peace worth unleashing something that will kill hundreds? There has to be another way. There isn't. The math is simple. 7 souls suffer, or 700 souls die. No. I stepped closer to the entity, my fear overwhelmed by anger. I don't accept that. There's always another option. Always a third choice. I just need to find it. The entity, the keeper, I started calling it in my mind, tilted its head. "You have 1 week. If you can find another way to seal the barrier, I'll support it." If not, you stop releasing spirits, or I'll stop you myself." And it vanished, leaving only frost and the smell of ozone. Mrs. Park and I looked at each other. "What do we do?" she asked. "Research. There has to be a way to seal the barrier without trapping souls in eternal service." I called in every favor I had. Talked to priests, rabbis, imams, Buddhist monks, Wiccan priestesses, paranormal investigators, physicists who studied quantum mechanics, philosophers who studied ethics, anyone who might have insight into sealing barriers between worlds without using unwilling soul guardians. Most thought I was crazy. A few understood. One had an answer. Master Lin was a Vietnamese Buddhist monk who'd studied what he called the architecture of death, the structures and systems that govern how souls transition from life to whatever comes next. He was 93 years old, the same age the asylum had been dead, and when I told him my problem, he smiled sadly. "You've discovered one of the old systems," he said. "Built on suffering, powered by guilt and fear and unfinished business. Very effective. Very cruel. Can it be replaced? Yes, but the replacement must be equally strong. The barrier needs anchor souls bound to this world, maintaining the seal. But they don't need to be suffering souls. They can be willing ones. Where do I find souls willing to spend eternity as guardians?" You ask. The dead are all around us. Many linger by choice, not because they're trapped. They stay because they have nothing calling them forward, no purpose to fulfill. Give them purpose, and many will serve gladly. Taught me the ritual. How to call to willing spirits. How to offer them a choice. Cross over to whatever awaits. Or stay and serve as guardians with full knowledge and consent. The ritual required sacrifice. Someone living had to anchor the spell, had to offer themselves as the first willing guardian, binding their spirit to the barrier while their body remained alive. It would be agonizing. The person would feel every death that had ever happened in the building. Every spirit that tried to cross the barrier, every moment of suffering the building had witnessed, but it would only need to last until 7 willing guardian spirits could be found to replace the 7 I'd released. How long does that usually take? I asked Master Lin. Weeks, months, sometimes years. And during that time, the living person anchoring the spell experiences constant pain, cannot leave the building's grounds, lives in a state between life and death. Many go mad. Few survive with their sanity intact. Thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. I'll do it. The ritual took place in my hallway at midnight on the 7th day. Exactly as the keeper had demanded, Mrs. Park was there. Master Lin, the keeper, watching from the shadows. I sat cross-legged on the carpet exactly where David Chen had stood as a shadow for 60 years. Master Lin guided me through the meditation, the breathing, the opening of my spirit to the building's foundation. "Once you begin, you cannot stop until replacements are found," he warned. "Your body will live, but your spirit will be stretched across the entire barrier. You'll feel everything, I understand. You'll experience every death that's happened here. All 109 deaths. You'll live them simultaneously, constantly, until the seal is properly reinforced." "I accept," the keeper spoke. "You're trading your comfort for theirs. 7 unwilling souls who've served over a century. It's noble. Foolish, but noble." "It's right," I said simply. The ritual began. Master Lin chanted in Vietnamese, words I didn't understand but felt in my bones. The air grew thick, heavy. The hallway seemed to expand and contract like breathing. And then pain. Not physical pain. Soul-deep agony. I felt 93 asylum patients burning alive, screaming, clawing at locked doors. Felt David Chen falling 70 feet, those eternal seconds of terror. Felt Tommy Brennan's 7-year-old heart breaking as he called for his mother. Felt Max's loyalty, even as smoke filled his lungs. Felt Margaret's guilt crushing her, like the ceiling that killed her. I felt all of it. All at once, constantly. And I felt the thing on the other side of the barrier. The entity that had started the fire, hungry, patient, waiting, my body convulsed. I screamed. Distantly, I heard Mrs. Park crying, heard Master Lin continuing the chant, heard the keeper's cold voice. She won't survive this. I did. Somehow I did. For 3 months, I existed in agony. My body functioned on autopilot. Mrs. Park helped me eat, drink, use the bathroom. I showed up for work but don't remember any of it. My spirit was stretched across the building's foundation, holding the barrier closed through sheer willpower. And during those 3 months, Master Lin and the keeper searched for willing guardians. They found them one by one. Souls who'd been lingering without purpose. A hospice nurse who dedicated her life to easing death. She understood the importance of the work and volunteered. A firefighter who died saving children. He knew about sacrifice and chose to continue protecting. A social worker who'd spent 40 years helping vulnerable people. She saw this as her final service. 7 willing souls. Each one briefed on the purpose. Each one choosing freely. Each one stepping into place as a guardian with open eyes and willing hearts. And as the 7th guardian took their position, the pain stopped. The binding released. My spirit snapped back into my body like a rubber band. I collapsed on my hallway floor, gasping, crying. Free. Mrs. Park held me while I sobbed. 3 months of agony ended in an instant. It's done, the keeper said, and for the first time, I heard something like respect in his voice. The barrier is sealed. The willing guardians are in place. The unwilling have been released. All of them. I asked between sobs. All of them. 109 spirits, freed by your sacrifice. They're at peace now. Recovery took weeks. My body had to remember how to exist without constant soul agony. I took a leave of absence from work, spent my days relearning how to be simply Sam Chen instead of Sam. Chen, the living anchor. The shadows in my hallway were different now. Still there, the building still needed guardians, but peaceful. Content. The willing guardians radiated warmth instead of cold. When I walked past them, I felt protected. Watched over, not watched. Mrs. Park and I became closer than ever. She'd seen me at my worst, helped me through the unbearable. We had movie nights where the guardian spirits joined us, their shadows flickering on the walls like an audience. Their presence comforting instead of frightening. The keeper remained, but he was different too. Less threatening, almost friendly. We'd chat sometimes, me asking about the barrier's stability, him asking about my recovery, and slowly word spread in the building. Other tenants in B-Wing apartments started seeing their shadows differently, understanding what they represented. Some even began thanking them. 6 months after my binding and release, I stood in my hallway, the place where all of this had started, and marveled at how different everything felt. The hallway was just a hallway now. Beige walls, brown carpet, overhead light. But it was also a sacred space, a border between worlds. A place where the living and the dead worked together to keep both sides safe. I'd become something like a spiritual medium for the building. When new spirits appeared, because they did, occasionally drawn to this thin place, I'd talk to them, offer them choices. Some crossed over. Some became willing guardians. All had agency. All had choice. Master Lin visited monthly, checking the barrier's stability, ensuring the willing guardians were content. They always were. Purpose, it turned out, was better than paradise for some souls. Mrs. Park and I started a support group for B-Wing residents who could see the shadows, helped them understand, taught them the building's history, gave them context for what they witnessed, and me. I went back to nursing, but changed. I understood death differently now. Understood that the end of life isn't always the end of service, that some souls choose to remain, to protect, to serve. I still live in apartment 7B, still walk past guardian spirits every day, still feel the barrier thrumming beneath my feet, holding back something ancient and hungry. But I'm not afraid anymore, because I know the truth. Sometimes the things we fear are actually protecting us. Sometimes shadows are just guardians doing their job. Sometimes the dead serve the living in ways we never see. And sometimes a shadow in a hallway is exactly what it needs to be a spirit standing watch. It's keeping us all safe. They say apartment 7B is haunted. They're not wrong. But it's not a bad haunting. It's a protective one. I've helped 23 spirits since my binding. 17 chose to cross over. 6 chose to become willing guardians. Each one made their choice freely, with full knowledge. The barrier is stronger now than it's been in a century. The entity on the other side grows quiet. Perhaps it knows it won't break through. Perhaps it's moved on to easier targets. The shadow in my hallway taught me. The most important lesson of my life: fear is often just misunderstanding. Once you understand what something truly is, once you see its purpose, fear transforms into respect. I walk past guardian spirits every day. I thank them for their service. I honor their sacrifice. And I sleep soundly in apartment 7B, knowing that I'm protected by souls who chose to stand watch, who chose to serve, who chose to be the shadows between us and something darker. The hallway is quiet now, peaceful, safe, and I'm grateful for every shadow in it. The end.